Hungarian Folk Tales. The Fairy from the Oak Tree. Once upon a time, many years ago, there lived the son of the Green King. Now, since he was all alone in the palace, he was bored, and so he picked up his gun and set off hunting. When he came into the forest, he spied a little rabbit, took aim, and was about to shoot. "Excuse me, young prince, one good deed deserves another. Spare me my life." And so he spared the rabbit's life and went further into the forest while the rabbit scampered away. Then he came upon a fox, and the fox said to him, "Don't shoot, young prince. Spare me, and your good deed will deserve another." So the prince spared his life too and went further into the forest. There he found a deer, and the deer also spoke to him, "Spare me my life, and good fortune will bless you." Off you go to the centre of the forest. There you will find an oak tree with 3 branches. Lop off one of the branches, and out will come a fairy. But take some water with you, for she will probably have need of that. So off he went, and he came upon the oak tree, and he lopped off a branch, and a beautiful fairy appeared. "Water, water, please. I need water." The young prince dashed to help, but dropped his flask, and all the water spilled out. The poor fairy died there and then. All he could do was to take her in his arms and carry her home and bury her. Time passed, and the prince set off hunting again, and he came upon the fox. "Now then, kind young prince, for your good deed I'll tell you something good. Go into the forest, cut off another branch of that oak, but bring water with you because you may have need of it." The prince had a flask of wine with him, and he thought that the wine would do. He lopped off the branch. Out came the beautiful fairy. He gave her some wine, but still she went and died. So he picked her up and carried her home in great sorrow and buried her. After mourning her for a while, he once again set off into the forest to go hunting, and he came upon the little rabbit. "Now then, kind young prince, for your good deed I'll tell you something good, but come with me and I'll show you a spring of running water." Then they came upon the oak. "Now lop off that branch." And once again a beautiful fairy came out of the branch and cried, "Water, water, I need water." The little rabbit took the beaker, gave it to the fairy, who drank deep from it, and this time did not die. She then knelt before the young prince and thanked him for freeing her from the oak tree. They embraced and kissed. So now all 3 of them set off home. On their way to the palace, they came to a well and sat down beside it. There the fairy spoke. "I dare not go into your palace wearing fairy clothes. Please go home and fetch me some new robes." Now there was a willow there, and she climbed up into it, and a witch arrived to draw water. She glanced into the well and saw a beautiful fairy. She gazed and gazed but couldn't see anyone in the water. Finally she saw the fairy up in the tree. She called out to her and asked her what she was doing up in the tree. The fairy explained everything to the witch. And what did the witch do but seize hold of the fairy and throw her into the well, and the fairy changed into a beautiful golden fish. Then the witch set off home and fetched her own daughter to the well and made her climb up into the tree. Soon the prince came back carrying clothes. He saw the little rabbit and asked him where the girl was. "I went home to have a bite and a sup, and when I came back, she was up in the tree." So the prince looked around and, right enough, there was a girl in the tree. "Down you come and put these clothes on." And when she came down from the tree, he saw her face, and it was ugly now, when before it had been so beautiful. "Oh, dear prince, I was struck by the rays of the sun, and they changed my face." So the young prince went ahead and gave her the clothes to change into, because he thought she was the fairy. And he took her back home to the palace. One day the witch came to see her daughter, and when she was there she said, "I went by the well, and there I saw in the water a fine golden fish. Now what you have to do is pretend to be ill and tell the prince that the only thing that will cure you is if you have the golden fish caught." The prince would do anything for his princess. So the golden fish was caught and cooked, and she ate some and was cured. A single scale fell from the fish to the ground, and out of it there grew a beautiful golden apple tree, which burst into flower every evening and grew apples by noon the next day, which the fairies came for in the evening. Once again the witch went to see her daughter. "What's going on here? You'll have to have that tree cut down or else they'll know that you're not the fairy." So the young queen said to the king, "We have no use of that apple tree. Cut it down so that we won't ever see it again." Now nearby lived a poor man, and he was the one who cut the tree down. And when he was chopping it up into logs, a small chip flew off, and he put it in his pocket and took it home with him. The following day, the man, his wife and daughter went off to work for the king. They set off so early that they had no time to sweep the floors or make their beds. But in the evening, when they got home, they found that the house had been swept clean and all the beds were made. And they wondered who could have come to their house. On the next morning, they set off to work again. But they left behind their daughter, who hid herself. What did she see but the fairy pop out of the chip of wood and start sweeping the house? Then the daughter took tight hold of the chip of wood to stop the fairy returning to it. So that was how they caught the fairy. And the two girls went off to work at the king's court. There they took turns in telling stories. The king asked, "Now tell us another one about what you saw and did in your life." Once upon a time there was a young prince, and one day he went hunting and he met a little rabbit, a fox, and a deer. "For I am the fairy who the young prince set free from the oak tree." And the prince embraced his fairy tenderly. He had the witch and her daughter tied to a horse's tail, and the prince and the fairy from the oak tree lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Water Fairy. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a miller, and the miller had a wife. They had a fine big mill, and they earned their keep and passed their days. There was just one thing that caused them grief, and that was they had no child. And they grew poorer and poorer every day until they had nothing at all. The poor man lamented night and day that a curse had been laid upon them. Off he went one evening and sat by the mill pond. There he wept. All at once he heard a voice. "Listen, poor man, I'll help you in your troubles. I'll make you richer by far than ever before. All you have to do is give me the living creature that you have not got at home." So the poor man thought to himself, "What is it that I haven't got at home? Perhaps a dog? Perhaps a cat? What could it be? Right you are, I agree." The poor man cheered up and set off for home. He was still on his way when his servant came running towards him. "Quickly, Master Miller, the mistress has just given birth to a fine, healthy boy." Well now, the miller ran all the way back to the mill pond. Come here, you evil spirit. You have taken my child." But no one appeared. Home he went and told what had happened. They threw their arms around each other and wept and wept. What was going to become of their child? When would that voice take him away, raise the boy as the light of their lives? They never ever let him near the mill pond. And when he grew older, they told him that he was not to go there because the water fairy would carry him away. And the boy never went there. He avoided the place altogether. Now they became wealthier than anyone in the village before or since. Where they laid down a florin, the next day there were two. Time and tide went by and they sent their son to a master woodman so that he would be a forester. So taken was the master with the lad, so quick and clever he was, that the master gave him his own daughter in marriage. The young man went all through the forest hunting. One day, he saw a fine stag. He aimed at the stag, but the stag vanished, clean out of sight. Off he went again on the following day, and once again the stag was enticing the young man, and so it went on for 3 or 4 days. His wife spoke to him. "Where is it you go every day, neither eating or drinking, only concerned for your forest? But don't go near the mill pond, just so that no trouble will befall you." "I never go that way, my dear. I only go hunting in the forest." Once again he set off, tracked the stag, and brought him down. He thought of skinning it, but in skinning it, he got covered in blood, so he decided to go to the river and wash himself. There he set down his cap and his satchel. But once he put his 2 hands into the water, 2 mighty arms rose out of the water, fastened themselves around his neck, and dragged him in and under. His good wife was waiting for him at home. She ran to the forest to the mill pond, and there she saw his cap and his satchel. "Dear God in heaven, what my father-in-law warned about has happened." Up and down the edge of the waters she raced. "Give me back my good husband, water fairy." But the water was silent. She ran and ran until tiredness overcame her and she lay down and fell asleep. In her dream she saw, not far away, a shack in which there lived an old woman who knew many, many secrets. She awoke, and just as in her dream, off she went to the shack. She knocked at the door and spoke of her problem in floods of tears. There, my dear," said the old woman. "When the moon is full, off you go to the place and sit at the edge of the waters. I'll give you a brush, and with it you must brush your hair." So the young wife waited until the moon became full. She went to the edge of the waters, let loose her hair, and began to brush it. And then, all of a sudden, her husband stuck his head out of the water, but he said not a word, and then he vanished again to the watery depths. She went home and told the old woman what had happened. The old woman said, "Tomorrow evening you must bring a spinning wheel with you, and there you must spin." And so she did. She brought a spinning wheel, sat there at the spot, and began to spin. And when she span, once again the water frothed, and her husband appeared up to his waist. But again they were not able to exchange a word between themselves. "Off you go, dear girl. This is the 3rd night. On this flute you should play a sweet, sad tune. Then you'll see what happens." And so it was. The young wife sat there on the same spot and played. At first the water started to froth, and in she jumped and embraced her husband. But then such a storm blew up that her husband was carried off to one shore and the wife to the other. They were thrown so far apart that she stayed on one and he stayed on the other. Then the man took work as a swineherd and the woman as a cook. The swineherd brought the pigs out to feed every day, and the woman brought food at midday to her master in the meadows. When she brought the food to the master, she saw that there was a swineherd off in the distance. So she walked towards him, and they began to speak. And as they spoke, the young woman asked the man where he had come from, and the man began to tell her of how he had been born, and how the water fairy had carried him away, and how he'd been parted from his darling wife. And as he told all these things to his own wife, her eyes opened once again, and she saw that he was her husband. Then they embraced and kissed each other sweetly and went home. They had many, many children, and they all lived happily ever after. This is the end of my tale. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Little Swineherd. Once upon a time, over oceans deep and mountains high, there lived a poor woman who had a son, and his job was to look after the pigs. No matter what his mother tried to get him to do, it was always the same. There was nothing he could do right or proper, not even if you turned him into an angel. He was good for nothing at all. So anyway, this good-for-nothing of a little swineherd heard that the king would give his daughter's hand to anyone who could hide away so well that she couldn't find him. "Now then, swineherd, my lad," he said to himself, "roll your sleeves up, for there's a lot to win if you go about it the right way." So he gathered everything up, baked himself a satchel of scones, put on his heavy cape, and off he went. He walked and he walked through bushes and trees, over hill and dale, and still he couldn't find the castle of the king. For a long week he walked, ate the last of his scones, and still he didn't see a thing. And then he became so thirsty that his tongue hung out like a slipper out of a dog's mouth. Then as he went along, he came upon a well, and on it perched 2 white doves. "Well then, the pair of you, I'll have to eat you both because I'm very hungry indeed." "Oh, don't eat us, little swineherd. Draw us some water. We're so thirsty, and one good deed deserves another." And they begged him not to make a meal of them. So he went and drew up a bucket of water for them, and he himself drank his fill of the cold, sweet water. And so he continued on. But now he was so hungry that his stomach rattled like a dog on a chain. Then he came across a lame fox. "Well then, lame fox, I'll have to eat you, I'm so hungry." The lame fox beseeched him not to make a meal of him. "One good deed deserves another, little swineherd. I'll be able to help you." The swineherd's eyes were popping out of his head with hunger, but he decided not to eat the lame fox. He staggered on, and staggered to the right, and staggered to the left, and thought he'd never come to his journey's end. Then, far off, he saw a great lake. Down he went to its shore and saw a little fish struggling at the water's edge. Quick as a flash, he tickled it out of the water. "Oh, please don't eat me, little swineherd. I'll repay you for your good deed." The little swineherd looked at the fish, and beautiful it was too, its scales all shiny and gold. He felt sorry for the fish and put it back into the water. On he went and eventually came upon another well, and on it perched 2 other white doves. "Do you think I'm a madman? As sure as the sky above me, I'm going to make a meal of you both." So he tried to catch hold of the doves, but they begged and beseeched him not to do them harm. And the end of it was that he did them no injury, but drew them water, drank a great bellyful himself, and went on his way. Not long after that, he found himself at the castle, and at the gate stood the king. "So what brings you to this far-off land?" said the king. So the little swineherd told his tale and why he had come, that he had heard that the king would give his daughter's hand to someone who could hide away so well that she couldn't find him. And that's what he wanted to try. "Fair enough, my lad," said the king, "but have you seen the 99 heads up there? Yours will be the 100th if you can't hide yourself well." The little swineherd looked around and turned to the king and bravely said, "I'll do the best I can, your highness." On the following morning, the king came to him and told him to hide himself away before his daughter arose. The little swineherd made himself ready, and what did he see but the 2 white doves? "Come on, we'll take you away." And the 2 white doves carried him off to hide him behind the sun. The princess prepared herself for the day. She went down to the garden, plucked the finest of the roses and twirled around. "Out you come, little swineherd. There you are, behind the sun." And the little swineherd was furious and frightened. What could he do? Out he came from the far side of the sun. The next day dawned bright and clear. The little swineherd rose, looked out of the window, and there he saw the lame fox rearing up, waiting to take him away to the end of the world. The princess went down to the garden, plucked the finest of the roses and twirled around. "Out you come, little swineherd, come back from the end of the world." And the little swineherd was forced to reappear. On the 3rd day he went off to meet the little fish at the lake, and the fish took him deep, deep down into the water. "Not a living soul comes here. They'll never find me here." But the princess went down to the garden, plucked the finest of the roses, twirled around once, and called the little swineherd from out of the bottom of the lake. "That's surely the end of me. My head will be on the 100th stake," said the little swineherd. He laid himself down to go to sleep, but all he did was toss and turn, writhe and wriggle. On the following day at dawn, he saw 2 white doves at the window. One of them flew off instantly, but the other one stayed. "Come as quick as you can. You'll be turned into a fine rose, and so will I." And that's what happened. By mid-morning, all the buds had blossomed in the garden. Down came the princess. She looked for the finest of the roses and found 2 of the same beauty. She plucked both of them and fastened them to her dress. Then she twirled around once, but she didn't see the little swineherd. She twirled around twice, and still she didn't see him. "Father, I can't see the little swineherd. He's hidden himself away so that I can't catch him." "He can't have. Just twirl around once more." So she twirled around once more for the 3rd time, but she could have twirled around till day was done, and still she wouldn't have caught the little swineherd. Then one of the roses on her dress turned into a dove, and the other into the little swineherd. "My heart's delight, my only love, I will be yours and you will be mine. Nothing in this world will part us ever." And they embraced and kissed and clung together like a bunch of flowers. Soon there was a wedding feast, and everyone was invited. And the swineherd king and his beautiful queen lived happily ever after.